Was, I guess you would call him antisocial. You know, he did not...
very complex.
Complex,
Very
but at least
complex.
if you were from the outside, Saul could be very cutting.
Yeah.
Saul didn't hold his tongue.
Right.
He, for example, I remember, of course, Ruth was always mortified and embarrassed, shamed, humiliated, and so forth. When I remember there was one woman when we were living on 82nd Street, among the circle of Ruth's friends, who Saul called the mommy sitters. If you remember, Saul would call them the mommy sitters were here today, because they would talk, and they would just talk idle talk, which Saul didn't consider, and Saul did not engage, especially with outside people, in idle talk, you know, just talk of, you know, stuff, you know, it was a waste of time. Wasting time was very, very
critical.
Time was very valuable, and you had to use your time productively.
Not a bad value.
And talking, you know,
idly
about so-and-so was sick, or, you know, so-and-so didn't like so-and-so, or, you know, gossip.
It was not of any interest to Saul.
Not only of not interest, was antagonistic to. But I just want to tell you this one thing, or many things actually. This was often directed at Rose Moskowitz, who you remember very well. It was directed at people who were not relatives. I remember quite vividly a woman by the name of Mrs. Feldman. Mrs. Feldman, sadly for her, was very overweight.
Oh, I remember Mrs. Feldman.
You remember?
And I remember her face.
Yeah,
I can remember
Mrs. Feldman was really...
very unfortunate face to go with that.
Right.
And Saul could not stand her.
And Saul would come in and say to her, literally, "What? You're here again?" And of course, Ruth would be humiliated, shamed, and would turn red. But Saul would walk in the door and take one look at her and say, "What? You're here again?" I mean, I'm sure, but I think people kind of got the idea from Saul that he was very cruel, that he was very harsh, you know, that Saul didn't have a soft side to him. Saul was a mush.
He was a mush. Saul was a mush.
A mush. Saul would cry. Saul would hold you and hug you and kiss you.
Those letters.
The letters are quintessential Saul. But, I mean, people from the outside did not know him.
Right.
I remember many times walking home with Saul, or walking to someplace with Saul, and some man from the trade or something would come up and want to talk with him and say, "Saul, what do you think about," or, you know, "Saul," and Saul would just make with the hand, as Mom used to, mach mit the hand. He would just go, you know, shaking his head negatively, waving this person away, which was very, very unusual behavior. I mean, most people, when somebody comes up to you and say, "Oh, by the way, Seymour," you know, you wouldn't go with that hand like, "You're nothing. It would be a waste of my time to talk to you. Get out of my life." So that was many, many, many people had that impression of that's who Saul was. And in fact, I remember